Good morning. I'm Paul Mesibov, VP of Engineering from Pentek. And in spite of the fact that I am the Chief Technology Officer of this company, I'm not going to talk about much technology right now. You're welcome. And it's not going to be terribly long either. I'm going to talk about the personal part of being involved in technical working groups and building consensus. Now, last year at the same forum, Dylan Lang of Samtec, I know he's around here someplace, he covered why you should be part, there's Dylan, why you should be part of a technical working group. And of course, he covered all the right things, which is the contribution, of course, to the standardization process, including the benefits to the warfighter, and also representing your company's needs, because we're all in an industry consortia. We want to make sure that the things are buildable with our company's products, suitable for the end mission. And so it can really be summarized in many ways by, if you're not at the table, you might be on the menu. But I don't really have to go beyond that. Dylan covered that last year. What I want to cover today is what it's like to interact with people in a technically coherent way, but also to build consensus in ways that sort of embrace the various motivations that people have, both the purity of the development of a standard and, of course, making sure that they're at the table too, and the company's needs are met. And so, just like companies, standards organizations have cultures, mostly presented by and influenced by people at leadership at the top, but also within technical working groups, the chairperson typically lends his or her cultural effect to the group. And it's extremely important for building consensus. So what does one really want to do in a consensus building effort? Obviously, you want to have technical credibility because most of these, in our world, most of these groups are a bunch of engineers. But you also have to have people skills. You have to understand or try to understand what people are thinking and what their motivations are and why they are presenting their positions even if they differ with yours. And a lot of ways to do that, and some of the best leaders that I've seen and worked with in some of these working groups, they are extremely self-deprecating. They may, in fact, have a great store of technical knowledge, but they don't lead with it. They usually sort of say, listen, I could be wrong about this. This is the way I've been seeing it, but let me know what you think. And this tends to engender trust, and trust is important. Competition in a technical working group is the antithesis of collaboration. We want to collaborate, and we want to stay away from people's buttons. And you have to sort of look for those buttons carefully. So what happens in these working groups is, of course, there's a lot of voices. There are voices that need to be heard that are sometimes not as aggressive. And there are voices that need to be heard, and they show their need quite clearly. And so one of the things that is nice to develop is sort of the rules of engagement, the way that people interact with one another. And the more people that do this, the more other people begin to adopt the same approach to collaboration. In other words, you want to sort of be concise, get your point across quickly, and sort of back off once you've made it. It's hard sometimes for all of us to do this because a lot of times constructing sentences takes a long time just to get your point out. But you have to be a little bit careful because sometimes you've made your point and you don't even realize it. And then the other phenomena that occurs in these technical working groups is we spend most of our time not at face-to-faces. We spend them on conference calls that have 30 people on them very, very frequently, or more. And when you have 30 people on a conference call, you've got a certain set of courtesies that really should be in place that aren't the same as when you have 2 people on a conference call or people sitting around in an office together. You've got people who should have muted their phone before they started walking across the campus, and things like that, eating lunch, all kinds of things, and noise. And of course, it doesn't take very much disruption to keep people from being able to function on a 30-person or 40-person conference call. So be cognizant of the effect that you have just in the technical aspects of a conference call. You mute your phone unless you're talking. And then, of course, the classic stuff that many people in this room know, live, and breathe, especially if you're in marketing, is learn and use people's names. You know, people react when they are addressed personally. It's extremely important. And it's also good for you, because the more that you understand and have really memorized and learned and assimilated the personalities of the people that you are working with, the more you're going to be able to build consensus. And learning their names is the first step to being able to assimilate their personalities. Then, of course, you can talk all you want and make your opinions known all you want, but if you don't actually do any work, after a while, your status in the working group will not be sustainable. You'll be heard, you may even be listened to, but your effect on the group won't be as profoundly felt unless you actually volunteer to do some work, some editing, some research, do something to relieve the chairperson from carrying the entire ball, because very frequently it's the chairperson who does a lot of the talking, and then there's silence. He'll ask for a consensus vote, and there'll be nothing, and he'll have to conclude, well, since nobody's objecting, I guess the answer is yes. Interact, do the work, relieve some of the labor that tends to pile on one person, the chairperson, and then you will slowly begin to have an influence on the entire group because you'll be seen as serious. Obviously, emails and conference calls are what drive this work. I already talked about conference calls, but there are emails that are written with great haste, and they seem as if they were conveying more passion and emotion than actual substance. So don't write emails too fast. We have so many of them anyway. Be careful when you compose an email. I have a little bit of an attitude problem with this. I think emails should have a salutation at the beginning. Hello is a nice way to start. Even hello everybody, and a signature at the end. And a body and a proposition and a conclusion. Okay, it doesn't have to be that formal, but it's not a text. The email in a technical working group is not a dashed off missive. It's a record of the deliberations that the group is going through. So it's going to live on for posterity. Don't express too much emotion, make it technically substantive, and be careful when you write it. Make it clear so people understand it, because it's documentation. And finally, if you can't get to a certain place in building consensus, then back off. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them. So, and different groups have different consensus building processes, and I won't spend much time on this slide, but the open group has developed a process for building consensus, essentially balloting and determining whether or not the group has reached consensus. It's something called U-2, where if you have two people or two entities that disagree with the rest of the unanimity of the group, then they have the ability and a procedure to make their counter proposals known, and then it's a sort of a feedback system where that gets reevaluated and it moves on. So it's nice. So Open Group has done a pretty good job at that. And different organizations have different methodologies for arriving at consensus and measuring consensus. And that may be two different things, by the way. So I have a couple of quick stories Jerry asked me to tell, and then I'll get out of the stage. So I was a key contributor to the development of VITA 49, which is a digitized RF standard that we worked on in the early 2000s and throughout the 2000s. 49.0, 5 years of my life from 2004 to 2009, and 49.2, 2012 to 2015. And this This was created by engineers completely from scratch. It was elicited by some government agencies that wanted to see some common interfaces, sound familiar, between different COTS vendors, ability to digitize and pass around RF. And so competitors got together, scratched our heads, and came up with a 168-page specification for essentially the packetization of digitized RF. We invented it from whole cloth throughout 2004 to 2009. And then, of course, it blew up into 49.2, which is over 500 pages. Again, there were some government-funded organizations that could contribute, but it was a bunch of engineers who knew each other for a long time, collaborated well because they knew each other, and it was invented. But there was a lot of times when the groups had people coming in and coming out, and some of the members of the group had made some contributions that, because of this long-going collaboration that we had, there were some times that we weren't as organized as we should have been. And notes, even though meeting minutes were taken, there were times when minutes were lost or a member's contribution was not included. And you can imagine that when it came time to ballot, there were some members that began to resent their lack of inclusion, their ideas' lack of inclusion in the standard, and we recognized, the leadership recognized that this was a failure and that it wasn't going to be successful unless we addressed these concerns. So we went back and essentially revisited, along with the members whose concerns were not included in the standard, and addressed every single one of the points to their satisfaction. This delayed ANSI acceptance for 3 months because of that. But in so doing, we managed not only to include these very good ideas, but we made it a better standard. And so consensus building often requires you to fix mistakes that you make along the way, and then you get a better standard. Which, and by the way, it's in wide deployment today. You've probably heard about it. It's many of the procurement programs that include, radar and SIGINT and comms include the requirement for VITA 49. Now here's a much more current thing that's going on. Last year, the hardware working group within SOSA began to float some ideas about not just standardizing upon plug-in cards, profiles, but in fact how those cards could be interconnected on a backplane. Well, that would require a set of backplane rules. And there were a very well-defined camp of members who were totally enthusiastic and pro-backplane rules. And then there was a camp that basically had pitchforks and torches. So, and it was really like that. And I won't go into the reasoning because it's not necessary, because everybody has valid points here. And I understood what these points were. And so we went on for a long time. We addressed every member's concern, and we diluted and diluted the backplane rules until they had absolutely no effect on anything. It was a rule set without any substance at all. And it was still voted down. It wasn't even voted down because it was pointed out that there was no substance. It was just like, don't give me rules on backplanes, we don't want them. And so we didn't even bother balloting it. We dropped the effort for now because it wasn't really going to get anywhere. And it was really a premature effort. And when you have, and this is the other thing, there's a line I should have put in the slides, that ripeness is everything. When it's time for something, it'll be easier to build consensus. It wasn't backplane rules time yet. But at some point, it may get deemed to be a good idea. We'll just have to see about that. Anyway, just to conclude, the whole thing about being in a technical working group, it's a microcosm of your working life. Everything that you do when you go to work every day, you may not realize it, you're building consensus in some ways. And what you get out is a function of what you put in. And if you're lucky, you'll work with a lot of great engineers on the way, and you'll have a better career as a result. Thank you.